My name is Claire, and for the past 3 years, I've been the invisible woman at Henderson and Associates, one of Chicago's most prestigious consulting firms. Every morning, I'd walk through the gleaming glass doors of our downtown office building, take the elevator to the 14th floor, and settle into my cubicle with my coffee and notepad, ready to tackle another day of being overlooked. The thing about being quiet in a corporate environment is that people assume you have nothing valuable to contribute. They see your reserved nature as a weakness, a sign that you lack the confidence or intelligence to speak up. What they don't realize is that while they're busy talking, you're busy listening, observing, and analyzing every detail around you. I remember the exact moment when I first noticed this pattern. It was during a client presentation meeting about 6 months into my job. The conference room was packed with our team's heaviest hitters: Marcus, who could sell ice to an Eskimo; Jennifer, whose voice could cut through any conversation; and David, who never met a PowerPoint slide he couldn't dominate for 10 minutes. I sat at the far end of the table, my notebook filled with observations about the client's body language, their real concerns that weren't being addressed, and potential solutions that no one else seemed to notice. When the client raised a concern about implementation timelines, Marcus jumped in with his usual confident rhetoric, completely missing the underlying worry about budget constraints that I could see written all over the client's face. Jennifer followed with a detailed breakdown of our process that addressed none of their actual fears. David launched into a technical explanation that left everyone more confused than before. I had the answer. I knew exactly what they needed to hear, how to address their real concerns, and what approach would seal the deal. But when I opened my mouth to speak, Marcus was already moving on to the next topic. When I tried again, Jennifer was presenting another slide. By the time there was a natural pause in the conversation, the moment had passed, and the client was already expressing doubts about moving forward. That's when I heard it for the first time. "Claire's just too quiet for client-facing work." The words came from my direct supervisor, Amanda, during the post-meeting debrief. She said it matter-of-factly, as if it were an obvious truth that everyone already knew. "She's great with research and analysis, but she doesn't have the presence for leadership roles." The comment stung, but not because it was mean-spirited. Amanda wasn't trying to hurt me. She genuinely believed she was giving constructive feedback. The problem was that she was wrong, and everyone in that room nodded in agreement without really knowing me at all. From that day forward, I made a decision. If they wanted to see me as the quiet analyst, I'd be the best damn analyst they'd ever seen. I started arriving at the office earlier, staying later, and diving deeper into every project than anyone expected. While my colleagues were networking over happy hour drinks, I was building spreadsheets that could predict market trends. While they were gossiping by the coffee machine, I was researching innovative solutions that could save our clients millions. My breakthrough came during the Whitmore Industries project. It was a massive account that had been bleeding money for months, and our team was under intense pressure to find a solution. The client was a traditional manufacturing company trying to modernize their operations, but every recommendation we'd made had failed to gain traction. I spent 3 weeks analyzing their organizational structure, employee feedback surveys, and operational data. What I discovered was that the real problem wasn't their technology or processes, it was their communication flow. Information was getting lost between departments, decisions were being made without proper input, and employees felt disconnected from the company's vision. During the team meeting to discuss our final recommendations, I watched the usual suspects present their ideas. Marcus suggested a complete technology overhaul that would cost millions. Jennifer proposed a restructuring plan that would eliminate dozens of jobs. David recommended outsourcing several key functions to reduce costs. When Amanda asked if anyone else had input, I took a deep breath and spoke up. "I think we're looking at this wrong," I said quietly. "The problem isn't what they're doing. It's how they're communicating what they're doing." The room fell silent. I could feel everyone's eyes on me as I continued. "I've identified 17 critical communication breakdowns in their current structure. If we address these specific points, we can improve their efficiency by 30% without any layoffs or major technology investments." I presented my analysis, complete with detailed examples and implementation strategies. I showed them how a series of small, targeted changes could create a ripple effect throughout the organization. Most importantly, I demonstrated how this approach would actually save the client money while improving employee satisfaction. Marcus was the first to respond. "That's actually brilliant, Claire. I never would have thought to approach it from that angle." Jennifer nodded enthusiastically. "This could be exactly what they need. It addresses their core concerns without disrupting their entire operation." Even David, who rarely admitted when someone else had a good idea, was impressed. "The data supports this completely. I think you might have cracked the code on this one." Amanda looked stunned. "Claire, this is excellent work. I had no idea you were thinking about the problem from this perspective. That presentation changed everything. Not immediately, but gradually, like a slow tide shifting the landscape. Suddenly, my colleagues were asking for my input on other projects. Amanda started including me in client calls, not just as a note-taker, but as a key contributor. My ideas were being implemented, and the results spoke for themselves. But the real validation came 3 months later, when our Whitmore Industries solution was fully implemented. The client saw a 42% improvement in operational efficiency, employee satisfaction scores increased by 28%, and they saved over $2 million in the first quarter alone. The success story became a case study that Henderson and Associates used to win new business. Still, I remained the quiet one. I didn't suddenly become a different person or start dominating meetings with loud proclamations. Instead, I learned to time my contributions more strategically. I began to understand that in a world full of noise, a well-timed whisper could be more powerful than a shout. The success of the Whitmore project opened doors I didn't even know existed. Within a few weeks, I found myself being assigned to increasingly complex cases, and my colleagues started treating me less like the quiet girl in the corner and more like a valuable team member. But the real change came when I started working directly with senior management. It was a Tuesday morning in October when Amanda approached my desk with an unusual request. "Claire, I need you to prepare a presentation for the executive committee meeting next week," she said, her voice carrying a weight I hadn't heard before. "They want to understand our approach to the Whitmore success, and honestly, you're the only one who can explain it properly." The executive committee. These were the people who made decisions that affected hundreds of employees and millions of dollars in revenue. The thought of presenting to them should have terrified me, but instead, I felt a strange sense of readiness. I had been preparing for this moment without even realizing it. I spent the next week crafting what would become the most important presentation of my career. I didn't just explain what we had done for Whitmore Industries. I broke down the methodology, the analytical framework, and the principles that could be applied to other clients. I created a comprehensive approach to organizational communication analysis that could revolutionize how our firm served its clients. The day of the presentation arrived with typical Chicago autumn weather: gray skies and a crisp wind that seemed to mirror my nervous energy. I arrived at the office early, reviewing my notes one final time before heading to the executive conference room on the 20th floor. The space was intimidating: floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, a massive mahogany table, and leather chairs that probably cost more than my monthly rent. The executives filed in one by one. I recognized most of them from company newsletters and all-hands meetings, but seeing them up close was different. These were people who commanded respect just by walking into a room. At the head of the table sat Robert Henderson himself, the CEO and founder of the company. He was in his early 60s, with silver hair and sharp eyes that seemed to see everything. "Good morning, Claire," he said as I set up my laptop. "I've been hearing impressive things about your work. I'm looking forward to seeing what you've discovered." I nodded, trying to project confidence despite the butterflies in my stomach. "Thank you, Mr. Henderson. I'm excited to share what we've learned." The presentation began smoothly. I walked them through the Whitmore case study, explaining how traditional consulting approaches had failed because they focused on symptoms rather than root causes. I demonstrated how my communication analysis methodology could identify the real issues within any organization, regardless of industry or size. But the moment that changed everything came when Henderson interrupted me mid-sentence. "Claire, stop for a moment," he said, leaning forward in his chair. "What you're describing isn't just a project solution. This is an entirely new service offering." The room fell silent. I looked around at the faces staring back at me and realized that everyone was thinking the same thing. "Yes, sir," I said quietly. "I believe it could be." "Tell me more," he said. "If we were to develop this into a formal service line, what would that look like?" I hadn't prepared for this question, but somehow the answer was already there. "We would need a dedicated team of analysts who specialize in organizational communication patterns," I began. "We'd develop standardized assessment tools, create training programs for implementation, and establish metrics for measuring success. The market potential is enormous because every organization struggles with communication issues, but most consulting firms only address the surface-level problems." Henderson nodded thoughtfully. "What kind of investment would we need to make this happen?" Again, I found myself answering with confidence I didn't know I possessed. Initial investment would be relatively modest. We'd need to hire 3 to 4 additional analysts, develop proprietary assessment software, and create training materials. I estimate we could launch within 6 months with a total investment of around $800,000. Based on the Whitmore results and similar market needs, I project we could generate $5 million in revenue within the first year. The room was quiet for a long moment. Finally, Henderson spoke. "Claire, I want you to think about something. We've been looking for someone to head up our new strategic services division. Someone who can think differently, see patterns others miss, and develop innovative solutions. Based on what I've seen today, I think you might be exactly what we need." My heart stopped. "Sir, I'm not offering you the position right now," he clarified with a slight smile. "But I want you to consider whether that's something you'd be interested in. It would mean leaving your current team, taking on significant leadership responsibilities, and building something from the ground up. Think about it, and let's schedule a follow-up meeting next week." I somehow managed to finish the presentation and answer the remaining questions, but my mind was spinning. As I walked back to my desk, I tried to process what had just happened. The quiet analyst who was too quiet for client-facing work had just been considered for a division leadership role by the CEO himself. Amanda was waiting for me when I returned to my floor. "How did it go?" she asked, clearly anxious about the outcome. "I think it went well," I said, still in a daze. "Mr. Henderson wants to meet with me next week to discuss a potential opportunity." Her eyes widened. "What kind of opportunity?" I looked around the office, at the cubicles and conference rooms where I had spent the last 3 years being overlooked and underestimated. "I think he wants me to run the new strategic services division." Amanda's jaw dropped. "Claire, that's incredible. I always knew you had potential, but this is beyond anything I imagined." That evening, I sat in my apartment overlooking Lake Michigan, watching the sun set over the water and thinking about how much my life had changed in just a few hours. The quiet girl who used to hide in the back of meetings was being offered the chance to lead an entire division of one of Chicago's most respected consulting firms. But with the opportunity came doubt. Could I really handle that level of responsibility? Was I ready to step out of my comfort zone and become the kind of leader that Henderson envisioned? I thought about all the times I'd been dismissed because of my quiet nature, all the moments when I'd had the right answer but hadn't spoken up loudly enough to be heard. Then I thought about the Whitmore project and how my different perspective had created breakthrough results. I thought about the presentation I'd just given and how my ideas had captured the attention of the entire executive committee. Maybe being quiet wasn't a weakness after all. Maybe it was simply a different kind of strength. The week following my presentation felt like an eternity. Every morning, I'd wake up wondering if I had imagined the entire conversation with Henderson. The possibility of leading a new division seemed too good to be true, especially for someone who had spent years being told she was too quiet to take on leadership roles. I threw myself into my regular work, but I couldn't shake the feeling that everything was about to change. My colleagues had noticed something different about me since the executive presentation. Marcus, who used to barely acknowledge my presence, started stopping by my desk to discuss project ideas. Jennifer invited me to lunch to pick my brain about client strategies. Even David, the perpetual skeptic, seemed to view me with newfound respect. "You know, Claire," Marcus said during one of our impromptu strategy sessions, "I've been thinking about what you said regarding communication patterns. I think you might be onto something revolutionary here." "Thanks, Marcus," I replied, appreciating the acknowledgement, but still feeling uncertain about the future. "I just think we need to look deeper than surface-level problems." "That's exactly what I mean," he continued. "Most of us get caught up in the obvious solutions, but you see the underlying issues. That's a rare skill." These conversations were validating, but they also added pressure. If Henderson did offer me the division leadership role, I would be responsible for translating these insights into a successful business venture. The weight of that responsibility was both exciting and terrifying. Friday afternoon arrived with Henderson's assistant calling to schedule our follow-up meeting. "Mr. Henderson would like to meet with you Monday morning at 9, she said in her professional tone. "He's reserved the executive conference room for privacy." Over the weekend, I prepared obsessively. I researched everything I could find about strategic consulting trends, market opportunities, and successful division launches. I outlined potential team structures, revenue projections, and implementation timelines. If Henderson was serious about this opportunity, I wanted to be ready with concrete plans. Monday morning came with the first snowfall of the season, coating Chicago in a pristine white blanket that made everything look fresh and full of possibility. I arrived at the office 30 minutes early, my portfolio filled with research and my mind buzzing with anticipation. Henderson was already in the conference room when I arrived, reviewing documents and sipping coffee from a ceramic mug that looked like it had seen decades of important meetings. He looked up as I entered, his expression serious but not unfriendly. "Good morning, Claire. Please have a seat," he said, gesturing to the chair across from him. "I trust you've had time to think about our conversation last week?" "Yes, sir, I have," I replied, settling into the chair and trying to project confidence. "I've given it considerable thought, and I've prepared some preliminary ideas about how the Strategic Services Division could operate." Henderson smiled. "I was hoping you'd say that. But before we dive into the specifics, I want to share something with you. I've been running this company for 23 years, and in that time, I've learned to recognize certain qualities in people: vision, analytical thinking, the ability to see solutions where others see problems. These are rare traits, Claire, and you possess all of them." He paused, studying my face. "But there's something else I've noticed about you. Something that might be even more valuable. You listen. In a world where everyone's trying to be the loudest voice in the room, you've mastered the art of truly hearing what people are saying. That's not just a nice personality trait, it's a competitive advantage." His words hit me harder than I expected. For years, I'd viewed my quiet nature as something to overcome, a professional weakness that held me back. But Henderson was describing it as a strength, as something that set me apart in a positive way. "The Strategic Services Division I'm envisioning would be unlike anything we currently offer," he continued. "It would focus on identifying and solving the problems that other firms miss, the underlying issues that create long-term challenges for our clients. Based on your work with Whitmore and your presentation last week, I believe you're the right person to build and lead this division." My heart pounded as the full weight of his words sank in. "Mr. Henderson, I'm honored that you would consider me for this role, but I have to ask, are you certain? I've never led a division, never managed a large team, never been responsible for P&L numbers at this scale." Henderson leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. "Claire, let me tell you something about leadership. The best leaders aren't necessarily the ones who've held the most titles or managed the biggest teams. They're the ones who can see what others can't, who can inspire confidence through their competence, and who can build something meaningful from nothing. You've already demonstrated all of those qualities." He reached for a folder on the table and slid it across to me. "I've had our legal team draft a preliminary offer. The position would come with a significant salary increase, equity participation, and a substantial budget for building your team. But more importantly, you'd have complete autonomy to develop the division according to your vision. I opened the folder with trembling hands. The salary figure was nearly double what I was currently making. The equity package was generous beyond my wildest expectations. But the most striking element was the section outlining my authority and responsibilities. I would have the power to hire my own team, develop our service offerings, and essentially run the division as an independent business unit within the larger firm. "I don't need an answer today," Henderson said, watching my reaction. "Take the weekend to review everything. Discuss it with family, friends, whoever you trust for advice. But Claire, I want you to know that this opportunity exists because of who you are, not despite it. Your quiet strength, your analytical mind, your ability to see the big picture, these aren't limitations. They're exactly what this company needs." I looked up from the documents, feeling overwhelmed by the magnitude of the opportunity. "Mr. Henderson, can I ask you something? What made you notice me in the first place? I've been with the company for 3 years, and until recently I felt practically invisible." Henderson smiled, and for the first time in our conversation, he looked almost paternal. "Claire, I've been watching you longer than you think. I make it a point to know what's happening throughout the company, and your work hasn't gone unnoticed. The Whitmore project was just the moment when everyone else finally saw what I'd been seeing all along." He stood up, extending his hand. "Take your time with this decision. But remember, sometimes the biggest risk is not taking any risk at all. You have the potential to transform not just your career, but the entire trajectory of this company. I hope you'll give yourself the chance to see what you're truly capable of." As I shook his hand and gathered my materials, I felt a profound shift in how I saw myself. The quiet analyst who had spent years feeling overlooked was being offered the chance to lead, to innovate, and to prove that there was more than one way to be successful in the corporate world. Walking back to my desk, I realized that everything I had experienced, the dismissive comments, the overlooked contributions, the years of feeling undervalued, had been preparing me for this moment. My quiet nature hadn't held me back. It had given me a unique perspective that was finally being recognized and valued. The weekend passed in a blur of consideration, consultation, and careful analysis. I called my sister in Portland, discussed the opportunity with my college roommate who now worked in venture capital, and even reached out to a former professor who had always encouraged me to pursue leadership roles. Everyone's advice was unanimous. This was the chance of a lifetime. But the most important conversation I had was with myself. I spent Saturday evening walking along the lakefront, watching the waves crash against the shore and thinking about what kind of leader I wanted to be. I realized that I didn't need to become someone else to succeed in this role. I needed to embrace exactly who I was and find a way to lead authentically. Monday morning, I arrived at Henderson's office with my decision made. His assistant ushered me in immediately, and I found him reviewing financial reports at his desk. He looked up as I entered, his expression expectant but patient. "Mr. Henderson," I said, taking a seat across from his desk, "I'd like to accept your offer." His face broke into a genuine smile. "I was hoping you'd say that, Claire. I think you're going to do remarkable things with this division." "Thank you for believing in me," I replied. "I have some ideas about how to structure the team and approach the market, but I'd like to start by understanding your expectations and timeline." Henderson leaned forward, his expression becoming more focused. "My primary expectation is that you stay true to the vision that got you here. Don't try to become someone you're not just because you're in a leadership role. The quiet strength that helped you solve the Whitmore problem, that's your superpower. Use it." Over the next hour, we discussed the practical aspects of launching the division. I would have 3 months to assemble my team, 6 months to develop our service offerings, and a full year to demonstrate market viability. The pressure was significant, but so was the opportunity. "One more thing, Claire," Henderson said as our meeting concluded. "I want you to announce this division launch at the company-wide meeting next month. It's time for everyone to understand that leadership comes in many forms." The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity. I began recruiting for my team, looking for analysts and consultants who shared my approach to problem solving. I reached out to former colleagues, interviewed candidates from other firms, and carefully built a group of professionals who could complement my quiet leadership style. My first hire was Sarah, a brilliant data scientist who had been overlooked at her previous company because she preferred to let her work speak for itself. My second was James, an organizational psychologist who understood that the best solutions often came from listening rather than talking. By the end of the month, I had assembled a team of 6 professionals who shared my philosophy that thoughtful analysis could create breakthrough results. The day of the company-wide announcement arrived with surprising calm. I had prepared extensively, but I felt more confident than nervous. This was my moment to show everyone, including those who had dismissed me as too quiet, that there was more than one way to lead. The main conference room was packed with employees from every department. I could see Amanda in the front row, beaming with pride. Marcus and Jennifer had found seats in the middle section, both looking genuinely excited about the announcement. Even David, who rarely attended company meetings, was present and paying attention. Henderson introduced me with words that still give me chills when I remember them. Today, I'm proud to announce the launch of our Strategic Services division, led by someone who embodies the very best of what our company represents. Claire has shown us that true leadership isn't about being the loudest voice in the room. It's about having the clearest vision. I walked to the front of the room, looking out at faces that had watched me evolve from the quiet analyst in the corner to the woman standing before them as a division leader. I spoke about our new service offering, the market opportunity, and our plans for growth. But more importantly, I spoke about the power of listening, observing, and finding solutions that others might miss. For years, I thought my quiet nature was a professional limitation, I said, making eye contact with colleagues who had witnessed my journey. But I've learned that in a world full of noise, the ability to truly listen and observe can be the most valuable skill of all. Our Strategic Services division will succeed not by being the loudest consulting firm, but by being the most insightful one. The response was overwhelmingly positive. After the meeting, colleagues approached me with congratulations, project ideas, and expressions of respect that I had never experienced before. Amanda pulled me aside with tears in her eyes, telling me how proud she was of my growth. Even the colleagues who had once dismissed me as too quiet were now eager to collaborate with my new division. But the moment that meant the most came 3 months later, when we landed our first major client, a Fortune 500 company that had been struggling with the same type of communication issues that we had solved for Whitmore Industries. The contract was worth $12 million over 2 years, and it validated everything Henderson had believed about the division's potential. Standing in my new office, looking out at the Chicago skyline, I reflected on the journey that had brought me here. The quiet girl who had once felt invisible had become a division leader who was changing how the company approached client solutions. I hadn't become louder or more aggressive. I had simply learned to value my own unique strengths and find ways to use them effectively. My phone buzzed with a text from my sister. Saw the company press release about your division's success. So proud of you for proving that quiet strength can move mountains. She was right. I had learned that leadership isn't about fitting into someone else's mold or becoming someone you're not. It's about understanding your own capabilities, embracing your authentic self, and finding ways to create value that others might miss. Today, the Strategic Services division employs 15 people and generates over $20 million in annual revenue. We've helped dozens of companies solve problems that traditional consulting approaches couldn't address. Most importantly, we've proven that there's room in the business world for leaders who succeed through listening, observation, and thoughtful analysis rather than aggressive self-promotion. I still consider myself a quiet person, but I no longer see that as a limitation. I've learned that in a world where everyone's trying to be heard, the person who truly listens often has the most valuable insights to offer. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is not to speak louder, but to help others understand the value of what you've been quietly observing all along. They used to say I was too quiet, until they realized that my quiet strength was exactly what they needed.